A huge swath of the world has been utterly transformed in the last month, with half of humanity under some kind of lockdown. One of the ways you can really see the effect is what it's done to the environment, particularly air quality. With hardly anyone driving, you can see on these traffic-free LA freeways, there's just a lot less pollution being released into the air. Here's downtown Los Angeles last summer on a June day rated as having moderate air quality. And here it is last week. No smog, clear skies. LA is experiencing the longest stretch of good air quality it's had since way back in 1995. And this is New Delhi, India, one of the most polluted cities in the world, covered in smog in October of 2018. This is what it looked like a few days ago, about a month into that country's lockdown. Major pollutants in New Delhi's air are down at least 50%. The sudden disruption to business as usual will result in this incredibly drastic decline in emissions. But of course, prolonged lockdown, global economic misery is not the solution to the climate crisis. It's merely a glimpse of what the planet could look like if we move past fossil fuels. A space of possibility has been opened up in this moment to think about a future where our health and safety and economy are all flourishing together and we have blue skies over our cities. For more on the pandemic's effect on the climate, I'm joined by Elizabeth Kolbert, staff writer at The New Yorker, where she recently wrote a piece about pandemics and the shape of human history. Elizabeth, you've been covering the climate for a while now, and I wonder what you think the ramifications are for the climate in this moment.
Well, those pictures that you just broadcast were really vivid, and I think everyone has seen them now, and it's made a big impression on people. I think especially those people living in places like LA and New Delhi. I actually myself live kind of out in a more rural area, so we haven't seen such big changes. But I hope that it has given everyone across the planet in this very desperate time. I don't want to really be talking about the upside of down here, but it is one of the few upsides of down right now that we are glimpsing a world of smog-free air that we could have if we put our minds to it.
The other thought I had is that it's the forcing mechanism of the virus has changed our behavior so dramatically. I wonder what the implications are for the climate battle. One thing I thought about is just the amount of remote interacting we're doing, right? So air travel, which is one of the toughest nuts to crack with the climate because we don't have alternatives to fossil fuel powered jets. And now, people whose jobs require them to fly several times a week are not doing that now. They're finding ways around it. You wonder what policy could do to get people to innovate and come up with solutions if we put our mind to it in a similar way.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think it has opened up a lot of possibilities, and what the world is going to look like, if we come out the other end of this, no one can really say right now. I think, though, that we have to be mindful that whenever we've gone through these moments in the past, and this is, going back quite a long way to this, Spanish flu, we have pretty good figures of what happened to carbon emissions, CO2 emissions, global warming causing emissions, and they go down during crises. They went down during the 2008 recession, for example, and then they bounce back as people rush to get the economy going above all else. Then these emission rates just jump right back up. So I think that, and this is, a point that many people have made, if we don't want that to happen, we're going to have to take a really, really concerted effort. And there are lots of ideas out there, good ideas of infrastructure projects that we need to get off the ground. And since we're spending billions and billions and billions of dollars on economic stimulus, these are very, very logical candidates. We need to rebuild our infrastructure, and now we have, both a reason to do it. We need to get our economy going, and another reason to do it. We need to get off fossil fuels, and they should converge. But will they converge? That's the question.
Well, and in the past, you've seen people use. I mean, I know the polling around climate, particularly during the last big, economic crisis, was that you see people sort of set up this false dichotomy between the economy and the climate, similar, I think, to the false dichotomy they've set up now between the virus and the economy. And I think to the extent that works, then you go back to business as usual. But in some ways, it seems to me this moment is presenting the model in which they're actually tied together, right? We can't get the economy back until we defeat the virus. And it strikes me that the same is true of the climate.
Well, it's interesting. I was reading a story the other day. Yesterday was the anniversary of Earth Day, as everyone knows. And I wrote a piece, just a short piece about looking back at 50 years of Earth Day. And historians who look at it talk about how, environmental protection and environmental infrastructure was a bipartisan issue until we got to the Reagan administration, at which point Ronald Reagan sort of started to suggest that to be an environmentalist was to be a pessimist. And that became, a trap that we've sort of fallen into. And it seems to me at this particular moment that what we need to do is really present an environmental future, a future where we radically change our infrastructure, rebuild our infrastructure as a positive. This is the optimistic future. And it's really the pessimists in America who are saying we can't do it. And I think that this is a moment, where a lot of narratives are going to be remade. And I hope that they're remade in a positive way. Once again, when you look at the politics of this country right now, you certainly don't feel there's any guarantee that that's going to happen, I'm afraid.
One small example of sort of thinking in a new way is Milan, which, of course, was just at the center of the region in Italy that had the worst part of the outbreak there. That was one of the most brutal, and it has been one of the most brutal in the world. They're talking about reopening now, and they've announced this ambitious scheme to reduce the car use after lockdown, which I thought was interesting. They're going to have 22 miles of streets that are going to be transformed over the summer. They're going to try to do cycling and walking expansion. They want people sort of not in cars and not in public transport as much as possible. And it struck me as like a small example of the ways that people might be thinking about how to restructure our kind of lived world as we reemerge from the virus.
Absolutely. I read that piece, too, with a lot of excitement. And I was one of the few bright spots, in the coverage around coronavirus that someone somewhere is thinking about new ways to do things. And I was actually happened to be in Milan just last year, and they have some great new projects of open spaces and parks and buildings that are sort of dripping trees, which I'm sure people can find pictures of online. But that kind of thinking that was encapsulated in the plan to reopen Milan with, as you say, a sort of car-free or many fewer cars in the city center. That's exactly what we should be doing in this country. Now, so far, I haven't seen anyone propose that in this country, but, let's hope that in the next few weeks, as people start to think about reopening some of the major American cities, that we get some really innovative thinking.
Elizabeth Kolbert, it's always great to talk to you. Thank you so much.